Hey.
Hey.
What's up?
What's up, sisters?
Hey. Don't you think I look quite tropical and bright today?
You too.
Too. I ain't mad at you for that.
I'm liking the lip one as well. I'm liking the pink lips.
You know
it's very
what?
nice.
I just was I was slowly, getting back into a bit more makeup. Right throughout this whole COVID situation, I was literally barefaced. And actually it was a good thing. I really feel like I went on a bit of a skin cleanse for the last month.
Because your makeup.
Say again?
Did you save money on makeup?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Oh my God.
Really?
But no, you know what? Wait. It was offset. You know when you're at home and you got too much internet access and you just start buying stuff from Amazon, and random. So Amazon, Pinterest.
Great Bezos, whatever his name is a trillionaire, wherever he is.
No. See, that's all good. So people are still buying clothes and trying to get their best lives in their house. I'm not mad at you. But for me, it was, you start clicking on things and people start convincing you to buy things that you've never would have bought of before. But because they've got your attention, you find yourself trying things. Yeah. And so I must admit, what I didn't spend going out, I spent on way too many experiments, home DIY.
I'm about to say it's home stuff. For me, it was home stuff. It's like this one. I was like, this is an adulting moment. So there's an ad recently. I don't know if you've seen it. It's for these yellow clips that you place under furniture that allows you to move it really easily. So like, when you want to move your drawers.
Nah. See, they got you.
Like,
they got you.
They did.
I bought some things for I don't think I needed them, but they convinced me so hard. I watched it long enough. I was convinced, and I ended up buying them. There are these things that help you move your furniture easier. I'm not moving my furniture anytime soon.
Yeah, the yellow things that you slide. That's what I was talking about.
Oh, is that what you
got? Yeah, that's literally what I was just talking about. That's what I'm saying. Like they're. Yeah. Literally, that you put them under your furniture. So if you want to move, to clean, anything like that, it's just a.
You send me the link.
No, guys, we shouldn't be doing this.
Don't let them catch you. Oh my God. Anyway, let's formally intro. We haven't even introed. I wanted to say I have formal hello before we get into the more shameful purchases that we've made over this COVID period. But I want to say a formal hello. Welcome to the BTL podcast. So for those of you who are new, we are BTL, Beyond the Line, and we are three sisters, wives and mothers here to collide, create and connect with you, our community of Black women and friends. We are actually on episode 3 of our brand new podcast format, and we hope you're enjoying it. We're hoping that being upfront live and in person is good, and although it's very gives a little bit more stress as far as getting ready. And there are just moments when you're like, do I do that? Do I look like that?
I know. I'm so distracted by what I look like, because half the time I'm talking, I'm like,
BRF? It's like, I didn't know I did that. I'm like, why don't you all look like that? But apart from that, we are excited to be with you, even though it makes us much more conscious.
No, because honestly, because you know what it is, you think, oh wait, I look good like this, but you can't have a conversation. So what I was gonna say is no, and so it's really distracting.
Especially episode 2, I was doing a lot of that because I was like I really like one of my eyebrows the most. So I was turning a lot to the side because I was like, oh, that's a nice shape.
So you're gonna have that weird lock neck, like, the points I was making. Nah,
you gotta move past it. You almost gotta not.
Yeah, let them see us.
Otherwise, I was like, why is my mouth so big? Like, why didn't I get told? My whole so and because I do that a lot, it's like so you just can't get into that. You just gotta trust people.
It's fine. I give forehead. It's cool. I'm a lot of forehead.
I give mouth and chin.
You give chin. I give forehead.
Anyway,
and T gives eyebrow.
We're here because even though we want to be, so even if we've got hang-ups about what we look like on camera, it's still important that we're here. And we reach out people and we have fun, and what we say is much more important than what we look like anyway. So there you go. But what are we talking about today, ladies? What is our topic?
So I believe we're talking about kind of survival in the workplace. Kind of as a theme, survival in the workplace. So obviously last week we spoke and got quite into some conversations around the kind of Black Lives Matter movement and just what that's meant for us, I guess, in a kind of a bit more of a wider perspective. Whereas I think today it's focusing a bit more on kind of like what in the workplace, and how not necessarily Black Lives Matter, but it has Black women, how we navigate the workplace. And funnily enough, I was actually in a conversation about this recently. I had the privilege of sharing space with 5 incredible women from the organization that I work for, the company that I work for, and the event was called Read the Room. Check it out; it's on LinkedIn. But yeah, and it was a very similar conversation. It was about how are the ways in which we've learned to just navigate the workplace and read the room and kind of and just own our space and kind of and it was good because it was from the perspective of kind of people who are junior all the way to kind of people who are senior Black women, and just learning from each other. So I think it's a really good moment for us to be able to do a bit of that here.
Yeah.
Having that, so I share space with you too.
Yeah, why not? And I think, because I've noticed, I don't know about you, but the amount of roles that have come up recently around diversity, like heads of diversity, we're looking for, like, I get pinged 24/7 on LinkedIn. We're looking for a head of diversity, global head of diversity. So it's become one of the fastest, like, trending roles that are being asked for. I know definitely in America. I don't know about for you guys in the UK.
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
It gives me, is it about us? Is it a hope, and is it a sign that people have heard and people are recognizing that they need to do something, and all of a sudden, people are bringing in these thoughts? Or is it more people are jumping on the bandwagon and trying to, look the part? What do you guys think?
Quick fix.
I think it is a bit more about because this is them spending money, right? This is organizations spending money.
Yeah.
So is it? Is it?
Is money power though, right? Because you can spend some money and have somebody in the seat, but will they have the power to really make the change that needs to be made? So, money is one thing, and putting your money where your mouth is a lot of people are doing that. Something we mentioned on last week's podcast is that, people are putting money and we're donating money here. But your points that you both made were, but what is the lived experience? And so in your workplace, what is it that we need to see happen differently? It's like, bravo, you got a head of diversity. Now what?
Yeah, well,
that head of diversity has to be a Black person or a person of color. Can I just say?
Straight.
No, I'm going to call it as is. I spoke to somebody who was saying, I'm doing a lot of unconscious bias training and diversity inclusion training, especially around anti-racism and stuff. And this is a white woman. And I was like, no, I don't get it. No.
Geez, I know.
I don't understand.
You know what it is? I it's one of those things where I think prior to the present time we're in now, a lot of those roles were held by white women, because essentially what had happened was, like, chief HR directors or people directors were given the role of kind of people and culture or people and diversity inclusion. And it was kind of it was very much a bolt-on piece. And I think that comes from the perspective of people not really knowing what diversity inclusion work is. So I'm sitting here as a diversity inclusion manager, by the way. So I'm giving my perspective in terms of, like, this is what it's like in the landscape. So, I've been in this role for 2 years, and for 2 years, when I looked at my peers, it was a lot of white women, and the kind of the credibility that they had was that they were women. That was often what they were bringing into the room, that, well, as women, and because we have that lived experience. And I think that now what's starting to happen is that, again, people are going a step further to go, oh, actually, we probably need someone with a bit more lived experience than just kind of being a woman. And that's not to reduce what it means to be a woman, but I just think, again, intersectionality is a big part to understanding diversity inclusion. But I think what's interesting about the roles and the way everyone's heading towards kind of bringing these kind of, I guess, experts or practitioners indeed around diversity and inclusion into the workplace, I think it is a good step forward. I think it's like you said, bringing somebody into the building doesn't mean much if it comes with no power, no autonomy, no listening. Hearing is a very big thing, because I think, a lot of the time, those people taking those roles, even if, to your point, T, if they are going to be a Black person or a person of color walking into those roles, there's very likely that, and again, it depends on what level you bring them in at as well. That's another thing. So if you bring them in at a senior level, it's very likely that they are going to be the minority in terms of one of the only people there. And if you're not bringing them in the senior level, you have to ask yourself, well, then what is the influence and power that person's going to have? Because, the work that I'm doing in the company that I work for, it's the 2-year journey has been a bit of a battle between those two things. It's that coming in at not as the top senior level, coming in kind of in a mid space, which has meant that while my voice is in the building, the challenge has been about who's hearing and listening. And I'm lucky enough to have had some great allies in the workplace who have opened doors and kind of created opportunities for me to be heard. But however, how much more amplified does my voice, and not just my voice, but the voice of the work that I'm doing need to be? It needs to be amplified, and to be amplified, it needs to have that senior leadership. So so for me, it doesn't always mean about making sure someone in the most senior position it does diversity inclusion, and if that is not the case, and if you're not willing to make that role within that leadership boardroom level, then it's just making sure that, so in that room, who is responsible for making sure that voice is heard?
So I think the room has to be, and it's more than just that room, right? So you bring somebody in the room to have the conversation. But one of the things that I feel so strongly about, and I feel like, you know, for all of our community here that is experiencing this and living this, is that you have to make it every single person's responsibility. Like, it can never be one person's responsibility. Like, from a strategic perspective, unless everybody's accountable for achieving outcomes around this, then it will always just be somebody else's.
It'll be a bolt-on. It'll just be this bolt-on
that can be forgotten and dropped to the bottom when other things more important become more pressing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that, for me, that diversity and inclusion officer manager, one question I will ask is, what is the proximity to decision making? And so I would
very good
interview stage. What would be my proximity to decision making? Because if it is there to be like, oh, we've got this new role and then nothing, there's no power, there's no change. Well, then that person can't really do anything. Therefore,
you know what? I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to take that into my next appraisal. Thanks for that. I'm never going to lie. Because that is a big thing. That is a huge part.
My mentor said, she said that. She said, just because even on job descriptions, they may say you're part of the senior team. But that doesn't mean, that could mean that you're around that table, but your mouth still has to be shut. So she said, even in the interview, ask what is the proximity to decision making that will have. Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think then? So for people on the ground, right? So that, I think that's one aspect, right? So there's, if you have the opportunity to come into this space in this type of role, you know, having those clear set of expectations and being clear with the people that are trying to bring you in. What is your influence? What is your power? What is the commitment throughout the whole entire organization? All of those things, I think, are really powerful and important questions conversations to be having. But for people on the ground, you know, you're a mid-manager, you're an intern, you're an individual contributor, you're a team lead, whatever, right? You're the VP. So what do you think for us, especially now in this moment, we've got some ears, let's be honest, right? People's ears are a little bit more open. What is it that we think we can do on the ground today to improve some of the experiences that we are having?
So, sorry, T, do you want to take that one? I'll go after. Okay, so I was just going to say that, do you know what this is? Because basically, you know, when we can get heated, and so we're like, who's going to take the space? This is just real life. This is how we are as sisters. We have opinions, but I'm just going to go. I was just going to say that I think that, you know, it's about education is really key. I think no matter what level of work or what kind of power structure, whatever, education has to be the thread that runs through all of this, in terms of how do we invest in a culture that is centered around education, that's educating about these lived experiences, so that the lived experiences become learned. Because I think for me, when I do my workshops at work, I always talk about how, you know, if you don't have lived experience, learned experience is there. It's kind of the backup. Learned experience is there to be able to help you get to your point of compassion or empathy or understanding, emotional intelligence, reflective practice. All of that is going to come through the education. And, you know, what we did at the when the whole George Floyd incident happened, one of the first things we did as a business to respond was to give everybody a day of reflection. So literally a Friday was like, there's no work today. And we want everybody to be purposeful in that time and intentional. And we provided some opportunities for resources, something that I think a lot of companies did. There was a sense of like, for a lot of people, they didn't get that this was a thing. So here's some space to educate. Now, I know that's particularly around kind of Black Lives Matter and race and as an issue, but I think just in general, when we look at diversity and inclusion as the landscape of what it is, I think education is an absolute key part. Because as a D&I practitioner, you know, your role is to try and give perspectives of all of those lenses, which is hard to do when you're one person. And whereas, but if you kind of encourage people to educate themselves, what they do then bring is that lived experience, learned experience of their friends, partners, their community groups, all that stuff into the workplace. Because I think one thing that has changed is the role of businesses in society. I think the role of workplace in society. I think before you came to work, you did your job, and you went home. Whereas now, I speak about this a lot in terms of like, now you're coming to work is so much more about it's not so much more than just about kind of your job. It's who am I? It's what I stand for. I'm looking to work somewhere that matches me on a moral level. I'm looking to work somewhere that matches me on my values. So I think that when you talk about people who are not the diversity inclusion person and the roles that exist within a company structure, I think it's about asking yourself that question in terms of what is my purpose within the work that I'm doing that goes beyond just my title. That's what I'd say. I think asking those questions and being intentional to the business leads and to your managers to ask that question so that you have the opportunity to say, well, what are the actions that I can take up about? Because I think a lot of the focus is around what are the actions and what can we do. That's a question I get asked a lot. And so I think it is about understanding, first of all, what is it you are moved by? What is it you're interested in? What is it you want to kind of get involved with? And if it exists in the workplace, attach yourself to it, take part, educate yourself in that space. And if it doesn't, what is the room to kind of collect and build a community to start something in that space or to fill that gap?
Yes. Yeah. Now, what I was going to say is I'm just thinking about the people that don't have any decision-making abilities, don't have any, power, if you like, entry level or whatever. And for me, it's like if there is nobody in your workplace that is an ally or another Black person or person of color that you can kind of talk with, for me, it's about taking it out of your work environment then. I would kind of like really advise that, because it can be really hard in your job, depending on how you're set up, depending on what your organization is like. And if you don't even feel safe to talk to anybody in that organization because you don't think they'll understand or your voice will be heard, take it outside. Make that's when I say to things like have a mentor or really kind of build connect with a network of maybe like-minded people, professionals or whatever, to talk about these things in a different space, and then you can go to work knowing that you've got that outside of your workplace, because you might not find it in your workplace. And your work, we spend a lot of time at work, a lot of our lives, a lot of our week or whatever. And if you have that in your work environment, look for a kinship, look for that outside. I've done that plenty of times. Like all the things that I do, Black Women in Theatre and all of the other space that are outside of work, sometimes fuel me and help with that if I can't do that in my job.
Yeah. I agree. And I think, just to build on what you say, so for whether it's looking outside or pushing the needle internally, I think both are needed. And I think for, one of the things that I've always been so fortunate to see in my workplace is having an organization that's willing to listen and willing, and I think, whether it's setting up a group or, a Black women's network or, whatever, right? So I think encouraging starting something within your organization, I think is a good place to go as far as, hey, we recognize that there is an underrepresentation. What are we going to do about it? And I think adding your voice to this conversation is really important. And so I think for some, it might be a leap of faith and a leap of boldness to be the first to put your hand up and say, we need this. And I think for those of you that have that, then do it. I think the time is now. And maybe, like you said, for those that maybe don't have that inkling or feel a little bit unsafe, like how much do you think social media and the pressure from social media and putting companies on blast is helping? Where it's like, okay, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to take this outside. And so do you think peer pressure is going to be a way, outside pressure is going to be a way that some of these organizations are forced to look at this? If, we can't do anything from inside, but outside externally, we might start to see some pressure put in that, again, we can stand up internally and say, hey, we can capitalize this. And whether it's talking to your HR lead, talking to your own managers and saying, look,
I think so. There are, I've been, especially during COVID, I was in a lot of WhatsApp, Zoom gatherings and networks, especially for either Black women or POs, people of color in general. And a lot of people are really tired though. That's why I just made that suggestion of looking outside of your workplace too. Because even if you are the one that fights a good fight in your workplace, cool, you still need refueling, and that you might find that outside the work. Or, like we were saying, it might just be a task just to turn up to work, just to open that Zoom call and sit in that meeting. So if you don't actually feel like right now I can, then, be safe, first of all.
Self-care is really important.
But if you're able to, 100%, like I'll speak openly that with my workplace, has started to become more open in terms of listening and things like that. And I thank God that a lot of the, we all get along. A lot of the people that I work with all get along, and especially my Black and Asian colleagues, we really do get along, and we really kind of do have created our own network as well. And that's brilliant. And we've got our own WhatsApp group, and it more is just to kind of just support each other really. And if we do want to ever talk about race or how we feel or microaggressions, we kind of like talk amongst ourselves first and say, look, this is how I'm feeling. Sometimes it goes outside of that group and we do speak further. Other times it may not, because that person's like, actually, I don't want to talk to my boss or the CEO about it. I just want to share with you guys what's happened. And that's good enough. Because some people are tired, and they can't do anything because there's like, I've either been doing everything and no one's heard, or I just don't feel safe to. I just need to just get my job done so I can.
But is that okay though? Like, is that okay? Like the fact that, you're in a situation where you are experiencing that, and the idea that, oh, I've just got to deal with it amongst myself. So it's one thing to say, oh, at least now I have a few friends I can vent to. But there's something that just doesn't sit with me. That it stays within that chat group or that WhatsApp group. I'm like,
but
no.
say you were, because I've spoken to people and they are the only Black person, only POC in their organisation, only. And they don't feel like they can talk to anybody, even they don't recognise any problems. Do you know what I mean? Those kind of people are like, I'm not going to go to my CEO by my one self and say something. And there's not
but this is where we're taking it back to the point about these heads of diversity roles and all these roles coming in. That is partly our job. That is part of our role. It's that we are advocates. We have to be advocates, and I think being an advocate is such a key part of that role, and not just an advocate for our own communities and who we represent in terms of our own identity, but we have to advocate for the underrepresented, marginalized, and minoritized voices in all spaces. So I know it's natural that we're going to give a focus on race because that is our lived experience, but equally I have to be the advocate for the queer community. I have to be the advocate for the disabled community. I have to be the advocate for all communities in the sense of who are underrepresented and therefore don't always have that platform, which is why I go back to saying, so I have to be educated. I have to continue to educate myself on those experiences, because if it's not where some of it is not my life, so my privilege of being able-bodied, for instance, I therefore need to make sure that I have to be intentional to make sure that it's front of mind. And I think, and this is what I always say to people. I'm like, if I'm sitting here as a diversity inclusion manager in the business saying that I have to do that work, so does everybody else. Like, and I think sometimes that role becomes a bit of a cop out. And I know I felt pressure at work where it's like, well, we have a diversity inclusion manager, so she is the oracle for all, which is not. It's not the case. I'm not an encyclopedia of every underrepresented experience. But what I have done is, what I do have is the compassion, is the empathy, it's humanity. Like I think to take on this job, it's by no means a small feat. And I do think I've been blessed with a level of I think, well, I say I'm blessed. I'm blessed with the fact that, to your point, T, I have a network outside of work that allows me to be refueled constantly. This being one of them. So the conversations I'm going to have on this podcast and things I'm going to say are going to be way more out there, a lot more straightforward than I would in work. And I think even that is a little bit scary. Like, I must admit that, because of the role I do, I was very hesitant to kind of take part in anything outside of work, because I thought it could jeopardize my role, because people can hear this and go, wait, hold on, isn't she the same one who says it's let's take our time, let's not, whereas on here I'll be like, let's hurry up. But I think it's that point of, you need to be able to exist in different spaces to be able to be fueled. But then in the workplace, and I always give that kind of framework of, in the workplace, the role of diversity inclusion people has to be about their advocacy. We have to advocate. And if we're getting tired, then it's on the company to recharge us, to say, actually, if our diversity inclusion person who we've nominated to take on that responsibility is not getting the support, then it's the hardest part that we have to do, is that we have to advocate on our own behalf too. So, hey, senior leaders, you've brought me into this business to do this. I'm shielding you in a way. I'm protecting you from a lot of the noise, because people are coming to me. And I think that's where, and that's the part, and that's the problem. It is the problem, but it's also the part where I'm like, I wish that if there was any time to call out, it would be that I would say, diversity, and people doing diversity inclusion work in businesses and companies, we're carrying a lot, and we are shielding, and what is missing is our part of, is the self-care for us by our workplaces. So our peers may be going, are you okay? But I'm talking about our workplaces saying, when we hire this person, one of the things we need to consider is how we're going to make sure that they're supported, either with a therapist, with a coach, with a whatever. Like, I'm being so serious because, and that's something that is something that I don't think people think about. I think they think that because you care and because you're passionate and because you've got the energy and all this stuff, you're invincible, and you're absolutely not. And I think the hardest times I've had at work have been recently, where the whole Black Lives Matter, because as a Black woman, I felt this to my core. I've been on calls where I'm talking to management and I'm giving my ideas, and I'm the response back sometimes is that, oh, okay, oh, that's like, and I'm like, okay, having to keep my face.
You poured yourself out.
And then turning off my camera, bawling my eyes out, and then being ready for my next meeting and kind of resetting. And that's not to say that I don't think there's power in them seeing my vulnerability, but like I said, the role I occupy, I am fiercely aware that I feel responsible for people more than just myself.
And I think that's tough. And I think, and gosh, I empathize so deeply for your experience. And I think what you've spoken so honestly there will relate and resonate to many people that are in your space.
Definitely.
And so I really hope
absolutely.
And I really hope that we connect. And I do think there is an opportunity. I would love to see diversity leaders come together and really build themselves up. And so I think that's kind of another separate to-do list item. But
definitely.
One of the things I keep coming back to is that, and this is the message that I feel as a collective in this space, in the diversity space, is that your job is not to shield and is not to be the token, like, okay, whew, we skip,
we're covered,
that bullet, right? And it's like your job is to facilitate the change. It's not to be the change. It's the facilitation of the change, and it starts with you. But by God in hell, it doesn't end with you. And so I think the idea that diversity in the workplace is not a tick box action. It's a commitment to a culture change.
It's a commitment to a culture change.
That is ongoing. That says this is something that we are going to be. And it goes back to something you often say, Boog. The why has to be clear. If the why is just to get the monkey off my back, it is never going to go anywhere. And I think if you're a diversity,
and that's why it has to be in board level and has to be in senior level, because that's where the change has to be.
But beyond that, it's like, again, you can still be have a token at board level. Trust me, I've seen enough token people sat there. But I think the idea is that the commitment has to be, again, clarity on the why, and clarity that this is a culture change. This is a change that everybody's accountable for. Everybody has to have an accountability to this. It doesn't reside in one person's. My job is to facilitate, but my job is not to action. I don't action it. And I think for anybody who is being approached for these roles, you have to set that up. Like, don't go into this.
I was just about to say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but what I was saying
set that expectation.
No, what I was saying about board level is that the diversity inclusion manager has to work with the board level, with the senior meeting. That's what I meant, is in that's because that's where the change happens, right?
I say change happens from grassroots up and top down. I think it's together. Like, if it's just this way, people here are like, what why do I bother? Like, I feel like if it's top down, people are like, oh, here's another thing from management. But likewise, if it's just grassroots, it's like, when do we get their attention?
Yeah,
so I think
it's finding the balance. It's finding the balance. And I go back to, I want to emphasize something I did say earlier, but I want to emphasize it to say, a lot of the conversations that are happening at the moment in workplaces is about, oh, okay, so we're hearing and we want to do something, but we're tired of talking. Let's get to action, and everyone wants to act. But again, there's this, I have a thing, it jars me slightly, only because I think that this whole kind of push to act is a thing where you're like, you can't act until you know and you have a fuller understanding.
You have to understand
and so,
the problem.
And so for me, an action is listening. Because you're assuming that you've been listening and you haven't. So an action in itself is to say, we're going to spend the next 6 months, actually, we're going to spend forever, but we're going to spend the next 6 months intentionally, formally creating spaces where we get the input and the insight from our people. Whether it be a town hall, whether it be an anonymous survey, whether it be whatever it is. And we're not going to do it once. Yeah, we're going to do all of the above. And we're not just going to do it once either. We're going to do it every month for the next 6 months. We're going to do it every month, because you know what? Because everybody, is on a journey of learning and also a journey of experiencing, in terms of, if you'd asked me how I felt 6 months ago, I would have given you a different answer to what I give now. And I think that, and that's because of a journey of learning that I've been on, that has helped me take some really raw emotion and feeling that are completely valid. But I've now also had the time to process, to think about, so what does this mean for me in the workplace, and what is going to be beneficial, and what is it? Because I think that, you know, like you said, as diversity inclusion managers, facilitators, leads, whatever we are facilitating that process. And so I think that the point of wanting to run to action is important. And that's why, again, I go back to say, I recognize, you know, these like donating money and making sure you're ring fencing money to support Black business, or whatever it's going to be. You know, we're going to give visibility to these different communities. All of those things are absolutely necessary. So I'm not saying you don't do anything while you're listening. So, because again, it's this kind of like, my a really great colleague of mine always talks about kind of like, she talks about bonfires and fireworks, in a sense of like, you have these small fires just always going along the bottom, which are these visibility moments, which are the panel conversations, which are the days of recognition, which are all of that stuff that happens to help give visibility. But then the firework moments are these bigger action pieces that are going to shift and change culture. They have to be really well thought out, otherwise they flop. And if you flop a fireworks display, all eyes are on you. That's the thing. All eyes.
It does more damage. More. And I've seen that in many situations.
Yeah, and it's even recently, if you think a lot of the, again, I know we're focused with, I'm trying to keep it broad around diversity inclusion, but just because of the time we're in. But when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, a lot of the things that flopped were these firework moments from companies it was a dud. It was like, didn't quite explode.
You don't understand the problem. Like, we know all of us are in project leadership type roles, and the fundamentals of project analysis, project management, is that you analyze, you know, in order to solve a problem, you have to analyze and understand the situation, right? We do a lot of product thinking and design thinking. And the first element of that is user empathy. You have to understand who is it that you're trying to solve the problem for. And like you said, I think people, because that bit is going to be the tough bit, people want to skip all of that and just get to some kind of solution to make themselves feel good and give themselves a pat. But the work is understanding, is getting the empathy, is understanding the experience, is understanding the root cause analysis, so that just slapping a couple dollars into a fund is not the solution. Your hiring practices, your performance evaluation practices, your your boys culture within your organization, like root analysis of some of this stuff will understand systemic issues that are happening in the workplace, and not just kind of like surfacey, because those things, those things don't stick. Those things don't give you the lift and the impact that you're looking for. Yeah.
And can I throw something else out there as well? And it's going to sound really simple. I think something that when we talk about navigating the workplaces, and particularly as a marginalized or minoritized person, or from a community, is how do we just create better relationships with the people that we work with? And I know that might sound really like, but I just mean that the hardest part of a lot of this is it's how lonely it is, right? Like how lonely it is in terms of like, I'm lonely because I'm the only one or one of few, but equally I'm lonely because the people around me don't know anything about me, or they don't care to ask, or they're not interested. And I think that can be as hard as it is being the only one, because I think that, some of my colleagues who reflect on them and having really positive experiences of work, who are from a marginalized community, it's actually because they found a really great network of peers in the workplace, where they just, and so she's like, while my conversations aren't steeped in identity and representation, but I feel I belong here because I've got relationships with people, and I feel I'm seen. Like we do things together, we socialize, we hang out, we talk about all sorts of stuff. But so it's not it's not always this because I think one thing I don't and ask. So I can say, you guys tell me what it's like for you at work. But I feel like just because I'm a Black woman doesn't mean the only conversations I want to have are ones where we talk about identity. It's a big part of the conversation, don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying that means but it's not the only thing about me. And if you think about what we're trying to do, particularly around the experience of being racialized, is recognize that our there's so much more to us than just our race. Our race is a huge part for us, but that's not it. Like I'm also, like I said, we talk about the fact that we're wives, sisters, and mothers. So I can bond with people on so many different levels. But I think a lot of people look at me and get stuck on race. Not me, they get stuck on race. And so they go, don't quite know how to have a conversation with her. But I'm like, but if I was a white woman or a white man, you wouldn't be stuck there. You just go and have a conversation and you'd work some stuff out, and I think and so for me, it's like how part of the work that I'm doing at work is actually about how do we create informal/formal moments for connection, which is hard to do. I completely know that's hard to do. It's hard to simulate that. It's hard to simulate, but it's a cultural thing. It's that, and it's not just a bar night where the booze is free. It's a team. It's like team bonding exercises, and being, as management, being more intentional about how do I, when I bring a new person into my company or my team, how intentional am I about the onboarding process, and not just the first weeks when they're new, but 3 months in, 6 months in, a year in, too, because again, there's that sense of, oh, you've been here for 2 years, you know how it works. Whereas actually, I've been lonely for 2 years because no one's actually ever bothered to ask me anything beyond, like, hey, do you know what I mean? I don't know about you guys on that.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, that's I can relate to that. I can relate to that. I think that's quite hard. There's been moments when I've felt quite invisible in my job, actually, completely invisible. And I do think there's a lot of things that there's lack of representation. I'm not seeing anybody like me, so that's really hard. And yes, while I don't want to talk about race every day, but I do want to see somebody that looks like me, in my workplace. And I think it's hard, but I do think there is what the senior management, and I'm just putting it on them, is the culture that they set as well. Because that can be a part of it. Is it an open culture? Is it an open door? Is it just because you may have an open plan office, that doesn't mean that that you're completely open? And so for me, it's like, is the culture of the actual organization in welcoming and stuff like that? And if it's not, then it can be quite hard amongst your teams or amongst your peers to create that as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think your point, often you talk about these these lived experiences and shared experiences. And, I go back to, when you get people talking, we realize there is more that connects us than that divides us, And so I think some of the best moments I've seen in the work where I've worked is where our organization has given us a platform for people to just talk about who they are and share their lives. And we do it quite intentionally in like leadership development, type programs where there's a real kind of sharing and vulnerability. But I've also done it as part of, events at work and, last Thursdays or first Fridays or town halls, whatever you call them. But the more you give, the more of a culture you create within your organization to share those things, the more people realize that there is so much similarities and so much, as women, we connect with you. I can relate to you. I was on a call once and I was talking to somebody, at the beginning of the call, and I think Zoom just makes people really like personable, I think, and very, people just get into it. And this is just sharing, just like, just started to share about just some of the struggles that she had with the pressures to like, look after her aging parents, and just what that was meaning as a carer, as a primary carer, the pressures to get married, and just all these themes kept coming up. And we don't look the same, but instantly there must have been about 5 or 6 of us, men and women from all different walks of life, that were just relating and connecting with each other about, yes, I look after an aging parent, or I look, being 32 and not married, or being 40 and it was just like, man, there were just so many. It was just such a moment where walls kept coming down, and it was just like, okay, thank you. So,
exactly. And it helps. And if you think, going back to the point I made at the beginning about education, all of that adds to that. So that's kind of when I talk about the formal, I think for me that sits in the informal, and that's just as important. It's that kind of like, in every meeting, let's give 10 minutes just to do a, hey, how is everybody? Like, it's not even like making that small, but how is everyone doing? Like school drop off this morning, just stuff where you can relate on a different layer. Because I don't know if you would know, but how many conversations have you had, particularly with people that look like you, where you talk about stuff and they go, oh my God, me too. And they're surprised in their face, like, you understand that, or you go through that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I'm like, it can be triggering, like, stop having such a reaction. Yes, I also have those experiences. I'm not an alien, but if we can push past that initial shock, that's where the connection comes. And that's where day-to-day working, I don't feel so lonely, because while I may not see someone who looks like me, which is, and I'm not, and please know, I'm not saying that this is in place of representation. I want to make that very clear. Connection and building relationships with your peers as they exist now is not in place of representation. That doesn't mean, oh, we're good now. If we get to know each other, we don't need to worry about that. No, it doesn't mean that, because there's still something in seeing yourself represented. But I just mean, on the way to getting there, part of shifting and changing culture isn't just about bringing people in, it's also about the lived experience while you're there. And that is where I think that the work needs to really be intentionally done, to say, how can we create these connections with the people here, with the team that I've got in front of me, with these 10 people, particularly if you think, because of we've got the backdrop of COVID and the pandemic, where there's hiring freezes right now. You know, there isn't actually so a lot of the work that we're doing around representation is internally, because we're not hiring. The economy has kind of paused everything. So we're not necessarily going to see people coming in our business for a while, and businesses for a while, but that doesn't mean that we don't do the work. And so, and that's what I mean by how are we, and so you know, we there's a few different ways we can do this, and there's a few different things that we've come up with at work.
Sorry, Abba's about to start playing piano. Abba, can you wait, please?
Literally 2 minutes, baby.
Yeah, just put it up.
We have to wrap up anyway, because we're in 40 minutes now.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
We might have to do this in 2 halves, you know. It's 40
Yeah.
minutes a long time.
What are you doing? What is it that you have to do right now? So why are you playing the piano? I just said stop playing the piano. I said I'll give you the phone. Don't play the piano. Just give me 2 minutes. Okay. So let's
no, it's fine. Let's wrap. But let me. I think I can go back. Let me
say that point, and then I was going to close on just something that I feel like where organizations need to go, and then we can be done.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, so I think it's the balance between the formal and informal space and things that you do to. Anyway, I think, you know, I think I said it, and we can, team, maybe she can cut it with what I've said.
Cool.
I'm not going to try and do a fake ending. So one, say your piece.
Okay. And so I think you know, my hope and my you know, and I think maybe we share it collectively, but definitely, you know, speak for myself. My hope is that companies have to wake up. We are here. We're not going anywhere. And I think we are learning to use our voice and our power in a way more than I've ever seen before. I think even though you still may be you know, you may not still feel as powerful as you truly are, because we are. I believe that organizations, if they don't get this, our power will be getting up and walking away. Our power will be getting up and walking away and working with other organizations that are getting it faster. Our power will be going and doing it for ourselves and starting things ourselves. And the organizations that refuse to just, you know, click, get it, you know, start the work, do the hard work, commit, all of those things that we've described, I think those are going to be left behind. The best talent is not going to come to you, whatever it looks like. Because like you said before, you know, look at what millennials want in a workplace. They want values. They want culture. They want to be with organizations that are about something. They want a purpose behind what they do. And an archaic organization that hasn't moved its needle on its race and diversity and inclusion, those companies are going to be left in the dust. And so I think, you know, the day is coming that we will walk with our power, and we will move on. So you know, don't lose heart. For any of you that are in places where you're struggling, find a network. We hope to, you know, we can be your network. You know, we can network with other people. If you are in the diversity space, you know, we'd love to rub minds with you. We'd love to talk
to hear from you
about what your experiences are, what your shared experiences are. And if there are some amazing things happening in your workplaces that you are seeing, share about them. You know, let's give inspiration to others that they may be able to take and move forward. But this has been a great conversation. I knew it would be. Thank you so much for your energy and your passion, as always. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We hope we've been a friend. And we look forward to hearing from you. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.